And we welcome you back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski joined by Jim Leitner. Moving on to the month of March, and just looking at the schedule, it is going to be a tough month for the Fighting Saints. They have 12 games. That's one hurdle just in and of itself. 12 games in a single month. It's multiple 3-game weeks for the Fighting Saints, a bunch of hockey games in a short amount of time. But they also play 8 games at home, a place where they have struggled so far this season, a chance to turn it around. And the rest of the season, which is a total of 16 games, 12 of them being in the month of March, but the rest of the season, they only play 3 teams that are currently out of a playoff spot, and that's Madison twice and Central Illinois once. They have a gauntlet to run in the month of March. Muskegon, Des Moines twice. They play Tri-City twice. They have a bunch of tough games, and the Fighting Saints are going to need to play some of their best hockey. And we were talking about this before the show, Jim, but it's not crazy to think that even if you play really, really good hockey against these teams, you're probably still, you could play a great game against the Tri-City or Muskegon and still lose. We've seen that already this season with Dubuque against Muskegon. So they're going to have to play some extremely, extremely good hockey to make up ground in the standings, just the way this March was laid out.
And it starts with Chicago, a home-and-home series against Chicago, which, I've felt for the last couple of weeks that they've been the best team in the Eastern Conference over the last, month or 6 weeks. So you have a home-and-home against Chicago to start it off. That's not a very good welcome into the month, and especially coming off of a disappointing weekend against Cedar Rapids where you lost twice. So you're exactly right. This is going to be a really difficult month. I guess you can look at it that way, or you can look at it from the standpoint that it's a really good opportunity. I know that in the locker room you're going to have a lot of guys who think that this team should be better than its record, that this team is not performing to its potential. Well, now you have plenty of opportunities to show how good you are. If you go on a really good run, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could finish second or third if you go on a really good run. Mm-hmm. Granted, that the schedule is not very forgiving. It's not easy at all. But I guess from my standpoint, maybe you look at it from the opportunity that this is playoff hockey right now. Mm-hmm. And if you pick it up, if you play good hockey these last 6 weeks, and you have a nice winning record going into the playoffs, you're in a really good spot.
And some of the Fighting Saints' best games this season have been against
the
better competition.
No question.
I always go back if you want, and in the last couple weeks, it might be tough for the Fighting Saints to try to find some positives moving forward. A couple things, mathematically, they're well within reach of just about every single slot in the Eastern Conference except for the number 2. Even they're in reach of the number 2 seed. I don't think it's super likely. Mathematically, they're out of the first seed. But they're mathematically in reach of hosting a first-round playoff game, for sure, with the 3 and 4 seeds available. I think they're 8 points out right now of the second spot. I believe Dubuque has 49 points and Chicago has 57.
Chicago has 59.
59, okay.
They won that game yesterday.
They're 10 points out. So second is not necessarily out of reach, but it's less attainable. But a first round playoff game, hosting that first round series is certainly attainable. If you can go back to that Muskegon series to begin December, when they won in regulation and then lost in overtime to Muskegon on the road against a team that was playing better than they probably are right now, without 3 of their top players for one of those games and 2 of their top players for the other game. If you can go back and kind of channel that, I agree with you. You have to approach it as a challenge, because if you approach it as woe is me, this is a tough schedule, and mathematically and looking at the schedule, February should have been easier, and they didn't necessarily make up any ground in February. If you approach it that way, you're not going to have success. But if you approach it from a challenge standpoint and say, our playoffs start now, they could have success. I'm not guaranteeing if they approach it that way that they do, because these are a bunch of good teams, but it's certainly the mindset that you have to take if you want to make a push up the Eastern Conference standings before you get ready for the actual playoff hockey.
Well, you mentioned that Dubuque is 10 points back of Chicago for second place. You play them 4 times. That's 8 points. Mm-hmm. Granted, Chicago's been playing really good hockey. But you look at it from the opportunity. Hey, if we win all 4 of those games, you make up 8 points. And, you go from a 10-point deficit to a 2-point deficit. Then, obviously it's still not, you don't control your own destiny in terms of that race. But all of a sudden, you go from 10 points back to 2. I mean, that's an entirely different ballgame. So it is an opportunity. And, I think a lot of people are kind of looking down on Dubuque right now, and maybe rightly so for the month they had in February. But this is an opportunity where if you play really good hockey, go on a run, when you get to the playoffs, you'd have to look at Dubuque as a team that could be a contender. If they play well, if they take care of business, if they win these hockey games, then it's a matter of who's playing hot in March and April. Those are the teams that always win in the playoffs, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. And like you said, that weekend again, or that 2 weekends against Muskegon, they played really good hockey. That was great hockey, and against an outstanding hockey team. So it's not like this is something that's impossible. It can be done.
Yeah, it's just going to take a lot of hard work for the Fighting Saints and certainly commitment. And it's one of those things where, you play Chicago twice to begin the month. You also can't get down if that first series against Chicago doesn't go your way, because with 12 games, you have a lot of room to quickly make up ground in the standings. Going back to February real quick, the Fighting Saints, it wasn't an awful month, but another month where they were just right around 500. They were 4-4-0-1 in February. Youngstown was 6-3. They made up ground on Dubuque. CR 8-1 currently. They have a game on Wednesday. That's a phenomenal month of February for the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders, and no wonder why they are where they are in the standings. Chicago was only 5-4 in the month of February, so they didn't do much better than the Fighting Saints. They built up some ground in January, and Team USA only played 6 games. They were 4-2, so they didn't give up a ton of ground to any team other than the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders. But now, like you mentioned, March with Youngstown, they play Muskegon 3 times. They play Chicago once. Youngstown plays the U18s 3 times in March. I mean, Youngstown has, as hard as Dubuque's schedule is, Youngstown might have a tougher schedule with Muskegon and the U18s, 6 of their 11 games, I believe. So looking at that, and you don't want to worry about what other teams do, but we can from our perspective a little bit more. Just looking at that, if Dubuque is able to take care of some of their games and go 7-5, 8-4 in this month, Youngstown's going to have a tough time staying above 500 just with those 6 games that they have to play right there. CR plays Des Moines twice, Waterloo twice, Sioux Falls, Chicago, and the U17s a couple times. It's slightly easier for them, but still Waterloo and Des Moines and Sioux Falls and Chicago are all tough games for the Rough Riders. Chicago plays Dubuque 4 times, Sioux Falls, CR, Waterloo, and the U17s. Those are some of the notable games. I would say, looking at the standings, Chicago obviously has the easiest of those 3 schedules. But then when you're looking at the 4 against the Fighting Saints, like you said, if Dubuque's able to flip that script, start playing better hockey, and beat Chicago, then with games against Sioux Falls, CR, and Waterloo, those are tough games for the Steel as well. Not many teams, and you said this earlier, really no sleepers. Not many teams have an easy month of March. Youngstown's is ridiculously tough. So the Fighting Saints have to play some good hockey, but they have the opportunity, if they win, to also see some teams slide and not have the 7-3, 8-2 in their last 10 success that they did in February.
Yeah, and I think the month of February is, it's really, like in golf, they have Saturdays like moving day. I think February is really your moving month for hockey, because it's, you're a month away from after Christmas, and it's kind of like the dog days, and there's a tendency to kind of go through the motions a little bit. Now you get into March. You get a little more daylight, a little more sunlight every day. The weather, hopefully, is a little bit better. It can't be any worse than it was.
Fingers crossed.
Can't be any worse than it was in February.
I need to start working on my golf game. There are bets to be won in June and July, and I can't lose valuable practice time there.
Well, you might not be on the golf course till June or July if the snow doesn't melt, but the weather starts getting better. You start feeling a little bit more energy. The hockey starts to ramp up, not only at this level but at the NHL level. There's a lot more buzz about the game, so I think it's easier to have a little bit more energy. Big key for the Fighting Saints is putting the last month behind them, and the way that ended behind them as quickly as possible and capitalizing on that energy and translating that into some good hockey against some really good hockey teams. And again, you can look at it like it's a terrible schedule, it's a gauntlet, however you want to put it. Or you can say it's an opportunity. And I mean, that's what you really have to look at right now. It's an opportunity to really get into good playoff mode against some outstanding hockey teams. So I think on paper this team is capable of doing that. I think there's enough talent in the locker room to do that. Now it's just a matter of putting it into place and winning some hockey games.
It's time to put on the playoff pants, really. I mean, like you said, this is playoff time for the Fighting Saints, because if the month of March doesn't go well, you don't have enough time in April. You only have 4 regular season games in April, and those aren't easy as they stand right now. It's CR, Chicago, Waterloo twice. They're not easy games, but you don't really have enough time in April if March isn't a great success to make up the ground in the playoffs. So March is a big test for the Fighting Saints. You have to be up to the task, and if they are, they can make up some serious ground in the standings. But it starts with Chicago, home on Friday, the March 1st, and then away, a place that Chicago has only lost once in their last 15 games at home at Fox Valley Ice Arena. So that will be a tough test for the Fighting Saints, but they've played in some tough environments and won this season. See if the team can turn it around after the end of February. When we come back, our final segment, introducing a slightly new segment that we borrowed from a much more popular show, the Mount Rushmore of blank. Today we'll do the Mount Rushmore of exciting NHL players. You're looking at not necessarily a list of 1 through 4 in that particular order, but just the 4 most exciting in the NHL right now. We'll have that and a little bit more on the other side of this break here on the Fighting Saints Report.